Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Troy. Today, we are just going a little bit north, just a cat's whisker above the Mason-Dixon line, and we're going to talk with Charles Lafferty from Skyline Pastures. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Troy.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. So this is not my first time talking with Charles. In fact, Charles and I have been communicating via email for a while now. How long has it been? When did you start this project?
Back in late 2022.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought been at least 6 months that we've been talking. But so with this discussion today, we're going to go in a little different direction. We're still talking about pastured pigs, but we're going to talk about how Charles is using a grant to help explore the benefits of pastured pigs, not only for just his farm, but for other farmers, and even has a veteran slant to this. So really, really like what he's got going on here. I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation because there's going to be a lot to glean from this when it comes to, hey, how do we incorporate grant opportunities into growing our pastured pig operations to help us in that situation. So first of all, Charles, I think it's important to obviously, let's talk about you a little bit. Tell us where you are, kind of the 40,000 foot elevation of your farm, and maybe how long you've been involved with pigs.
So we're in Berks County, Pennsylvania, just outside of Hamburg. There's a big Cabela's there if people are familiar with the area. Oh, yeah. And I've been farming for 4 years, really 5, but the first year was just kind of learning how to care for animals. That was a couple batches of broiler chickens. And then this is my 3rd year raising pigs for butcher. I do it all part-time, as we'll discuss later. I'm in the Army full-time. But my goal is to transition out of the Army and kind of take this farm to my full-time enterprise. And obviously, this research project should help with getting my woods into a more of a silvopasture system and allow me to maximize the use there and hopefully recreate it on additional acreage in the future.
Yeah. All right. So give me a little overview of the lay of the land. So do you own the property you own? Are you leasing it? How many acres? Flat, rolling, mountainous?
It's consistently it's on essentially the south facing side of a large hill. It's 12 acres. Okay. So from the bottom to the top, it's all uphill, but nothing is extreme. You wouldn't need you can walk the whole thing. Half of it is in pasture and half is in woods. Of that pasture, part of it is my house and yard. And then I have 2 roughly 2 acre pastures where I raise a couple beef cattle and I have a pet donkey. The donkey also shares his pasture with the meat chickens and the turkeys we raise each year. And then I have 6 acres of woods, which about 4 of it gets pigs. The rest has a stream running through it that I try and keep the pigs out of.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's so no row cropping that you're doing right now on that. But you do have a good balance of cleared land and then forested land.
Yes, sir. About 50-50.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So, interesting. So you're 3 years into pigs, like I said, about 5 years into farming. So what kind of got you in this direction anyway? Being a career military, what made you think, okay, farming's where it's at?
So I just I do enjoy being outside. It's kind of that's a very stereotypical answer, but I like being outside, and the Army gives me a lot of time to be outside. Well, it used to anyway. I have an office job now, but really it was my last deployment. I was working at a desk, and I had a lot of free time on my hands, so I spent most of it watching YouTube videos and things like that, and looked at a lot of Joel Salatin and uh, similar leaders in the sustainable farming space, and just decided that's something I wanted to try. So as soon as I came back to the States, it was 2018. My wife and I were wanting to move off our 10th acre lot anyway. So luckily, we found this place, 12 acres, and bought it before everything got crazy with COVID. Yeah. And because now I wouldn't be able to afford this property.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, on the 10th acre, I kept chickens and I kept 2 goats. And fortunately, it was in a neighborhood that really didn't care what I did, and I wasn't bringing their property values down. So,
yeah,
I was, but I wouldn't call that farming. Those were all pets.
Yeah, gotcha. So now you're on the 12 acres, and you've stuck your toe in the water for the last 5 years of raising protein for profit for your own personal consumption as well. So why at this point did you start looking? I mean, did somebody come to you about a potential grant? Did you think, hey, there's some potential here I ought to explore? What kind of motivated you to go in that direction?
So people like to visit the farm, especially people that buy meat from us, and they would always come, and I'd always get comments like, oh, I have some woods, but it's not enough to run a couple pigs, or or I know of a space that that basically just unused woods that are at most deer hunting land. But even so, if it's only an acre or two, you're not really going to do a lot of deer hunting in that. So just wood lots that are sitting there untouched. So I started looking around, and I came across Northeast Sayre, and they had a lot of published papers of previous projects showing that you can establish. It's not necessarily not entirely about establishing silvopasture systems, but you can raise pigs in the woods without damaging the land. You actually improve the land, and you can do so profitably as long as you keep your stocking density at a reasonable quantity. And so I started reading these papers, and they were from all over the country, and down south in pine areas and up in Oregon, but no one had really done what I want to do in the Northeast region. So in primarily deciduous forest, opening up the canopy, allowing taking out less desire, maples and things like that don't really produce a mast, and then allowing the ground to grow, a thick layer of forage, and then running pigs in there and keeping them moving. No one had done that in this region. So I went through the application process saying, here's what I'd like to do. I think a lot of farmers in Pennsylvania especially could benefit from this. They have, wood strips that serve mostly as windbreak for their corn and soy fields. With very minimal infrastructure, they could fence those in, and the pigs take care of themselves. You just got to make sure they have water and food, and then at the end of the season, butcher them, and now your chunk of woods that was just a windbreak has produced a couple $1,000s for you and filled your freezer with pork.
Yeah, excellent. So, man, yeah, I love that. I love the idea of just kind of looking at a not even really a problem, but just I guess technically it would be a problem, but fallow woods and this idea of there's really not much to serve, especially when you get, I know in your neck of the woods, agriculture is really big up there. So you get in that neck of the woods, and it's like people are like, well, we're not going to mess with this. There's just no use of all this wooded land, or they're going to come in and clear a bunch of it so they can row crop it because they're trying to maximize the dollar per acreage in that situation. But what you're presenting is, hey, there's actually a way to maximize some acreage, produce an additional product, so you've got product diversity, and then also improve the land as you go along. So I like that. I like that multi-tiered approach to coming up with a solution to something that's just kind of laid and fallow.
Well, certainly is. I mean, they're paying tax on that land,
right?
Regardless.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about give our listeners a little bit of a background of Northeast SARE. First of all, SARE is an acronym for Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education. And so the Northeast part is, in fact, this is like the Northeast division of SARE. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So it's basically West Virginia down to Pennsylvania and then all the way up to Maine and all the way east. And their goal is to essentially empower, farmers in this region. SARE is huge, right? So every chunk of America is incorporated into a region, but their goal is to not only through grants, but also through a lot of free things. They have webinars. They have tons of information that's available for free on their site, which in our case is northeast.sare.org. And, in my case, they're giving me a grant to buy high quality pasture mixes to throw into the system after the pigs rotate. And then obviously they're paying me for my time to roll up all the research, take the soil tests, and very clearly show what I hope is a positive effect the pigs are having on the woods. Additionally, we're going to do some tree plantings in the so when a pig's in a paddock, if anyone's unfamiliar, they always kind of root toward the fence line, and they create these natural berms along the fence. I run Premier One hog net, which I think just gives me an added level of confidence in my fencing, because I have no perimeter fencing on the farm. So the hog net it will stop a pig at a run. Maybe not twice, but certainly once before they bend the post. Whereas with running 2 strands of hot wire, which I used to do multiple times, I had pigs on both sides of the wire, which is not desirable. I had said up until this year I'll never get a pig out of this hog net, but the other day I went out and one of the piglets got spooked and ran right under the fence because they're still that small.
Yeah.
And fortunately, they never want to leave their buddies. So if 11 are in the fence and one's out, he ain't going nowhere. He's just going to hang out till he gets a chance to get back in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
But in those berms that they make along the fence lines, I'm going to plant trees. A lot of them will be like fruit and berry stuff, that'll produce an edible mast. I'm also going to plant some fodder species that I can kind of prune and coppice, and then drop back into the paddock so the pigs can eat it. And then, in addition to that, if there's an area that's extra swampy, I'll plant something that's a heavy drinker. Or if the soil tests show that a certain paddock is low on nitrogen, I'll plant something that's going to benefit that. That's the idea. So I'll create these reusable paddocks that only see pig pressure once a year, and set a template of sorts that other people could mimic on their properties. And like I said, now they're getting good pork and making their lamb better at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I want to drill down on a lot of that and get into some of the details, because you said some things there I think our listeners' ears kind of perked up. So the one thing you said is that this grant is going to pay your time to record this data, to do this extra work, but they're also going to pay you, reimburse you for the seed mixes, the tree saplings, whatever you've listed on your grant application for reimbursement. Then they're going to cover that as part of accepting the grant. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think that's fascinating. So that's something that I really want to underscore with our listeners. So what Charles is doing here, he's not reinventing the wheel, right? But he is kind of sticking his neck out and trying to do what we're all kind of doing, but taking it to that next level to say, hey, we know anecdotally that pigs in the woods seem to be a pretty good thing, right? So what if we really made this a deep dive to do this data capture, data gathering type of thing, and just see how beneficial they are and how we can maximize that. So anytime we farmers look at this opportunity to try something new, then we have to look at the cost and the risk associated with that. This grant is helping Charles alleviate that risk and that cost. Was that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I love this. I love this approach to say, hey, especially with pastured pigs, we lean more towards the sustainable model. We lean more towards non-conventional, but we're also usually very pragmatic, and we're not flush with cash. So we have to minimize our risk as much as possible. So the grant is helping Charles explore not only how to maximize his land and his production, but to produce data to underscore that so it can benefit others in the future. So I love this idea that Sarah is helping him not only fund the equipment and expenses associated with this, but also values his time. So Charles, how did you come about that, calculating the time it's going to take to do this above and beyond your regular farm chores?
So I keep notes that improve over time. My initial years scribbles are kind of haphazard, but last year I kept pretty accurate time data on what exactly my inputs were. So I essentially used a stopwatch, and okay, I'm going down to take care of the pigs. Here's how long it took to fill the waters and move the fencing and everything else. So then I determined over 2 years, what it takes me, what it takes me to do 2 runs of pigs, to include all the activities, including gathering up for butcher and everything else. And it came out to it's only about 60 hours a season of total time that I put into the pigs. Like I said, they're highly self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. The most time-consuming part is definitely moving the fences and kind of cutting through the multiflora rows to build my fence lines as I establish the paddocks. In the future, that time's only going to get less because those fence lines will be, in my hope, permanent.
Yeah. Excellent. So looking at that situation, excuse me, where you're calculating your time, you're presenting that in your proposal. What else? I know when we talked about like a lot of the fencing equipment and the things you already had, you didn't, of course, need to put those on the grant because you already had them. But what other things did you list as out-of-pocket expenses that you were asking for reimbursement of?
So, yeah, it's important to note that infrastructure costs or anything with any, I guess, level of permanence wouldn't be covered by the grant anyway, unless it had, so the grant would cover if the fencing had a usable life of 10 years, probably more like 5 years, and I was using it for the grant and purchasing it, I would only be able to fund 40% of that with the grant, or the 2 years of its usable life. But I already had it, so I didn't include any of that. What I did include was pasture seed. I just read the bag, and determined what it is to establish new pasture. So once the pigs beat up a pasture, it's going to take me X amount of pounds per acre to go out there and hand spread. So that's on there. I put the shipping cost for it so that I can get it delivered. And Sarah pays everything on net 30. So I send them my invoices and they reimburse me. Probably also important to note that this isn't like free money, right? They're going to send me a tax document saying it's income.
Right.
But if I can show a direct expense dollar for dollar against the income, it'll be a net zero when I report.
Exactly.
Tree plantings. So my goal is to plant 2 or 3 year old trees rather than like bare root cuttings, because they're going to do better out there. And I'm going to run drip irrigation line along these berms, but I wanted more expensive trees because they're going to have a higher survivability. Mm-hmm. So I put the cost of the trees on there and the shipping to have the trees delivered. And then sales tax, because in Pennsylvania, apparently trees are taxable. And then, again, the drip irrigation line, and even things like the soil sampling and the Ziploc bags that I have to put the soil samples in to mail them to Penn State Extension to have the tests run. I put in my forecasted travel to the post office, to anywhere that I can't get equipment shipped. And then I budgeted for my technical advisor is a professional forester out of a forestry agency here or a forestry company rather here in Pennsylvania, and he's going to give me 3 consultations. One consultation was outside of the grant window. I had it done last year just to kind of get an initial establishment template, like a tree survey done, so I could see what needs to be removed to get the silvopasture started. But the other 3 consultations are also factored into the grant, so that I'll have basically collegiate level buy-in on what I'm doing. So it lends an air of credibility to the research.
Yeah.
So that's all factored in to the grant, and then the end result is about $11,500 paid out over 2 years to establish this system.
Very good. So now the one thing you didn't mention was the feeder pigs. I assume that you are covering the cost of those, correct?
Yes, Sarah will not cover the cost of livestock.
Yeah. So in that sense too, since you're covering the cost of the livestock, then you get the profits off of any production at the tail end of the livestock's life cycle, I assume.
Certainly. They're also not paying for grain or, like I said, there's no infrastructure costs in here, with the exception. There's no, non-living infrastructure costs.
Yeah.
I don't know if trees are considered infrastructure, but
Well, good. That's really helpful. And if you would, I want to be in full disclosure on this. The reason why Charles and I have been talking about this for 6 months is he asked me to provide some additional insight. And technically, I'm considered a key cooperator. What exactly does that mean, Charles, from your perspective?
So, for the grant to even qualify for submission, I need a technical advisor, which is the forester, and that is somebody that works in the agricultural space I'm pursuing at a professional level and is willing to submit certain reports and weigh in. And they're really looking for like a government agency or a PhD level individual to do that, since it is a research grant. And then the key cooperator is anybody with knowledge of the space, or that is in a position to kind of help further the goals of the project, which obviously you with your podcast and your raising pigs in the woods knowledge was a perfect fit for that. So I'm very thankful that you agreed to help me out, and I think that there's a high probability that having you down there as someone who can get basically lend some publicity to the project was definitely advantageous to me getting approval on my grant.
Yeah, great. And it's one of those things when you look at it, obviously I see the benefit in Sarah saying, hey, we need technical expertise and we need support. So it just shows buy-in, it shows community, it lends credence. And it's not that I carry any weight per se of who I am, but like you said, just having community involved in that to say, hey, there's other people that like what I'm doing, they're going to agree to participate in that. And in my position is a non-paid position. It's not anything expecting any type of compensation for, but I just love what Charles is doing here, and I thought this would be great fodder for our podcast and our other social media channels, just to show that, hey, this is an opportunity to try new things on your farm to make your farm more profitable. So yeah, I really appreciate you including me in this, Charles. I've enjoyed it. I love looking over stuff, and that's the thing. It's not a heavy lift because it's like read and look and comment and all that type of stuff. You're not asking me to come up there and plant trees or anything. It's just right. Simply look at the game plan and be involved in that and just kind of follow it as it goes along. I think it lends a little bit of accountability as well, just to say, hey, I like where this is headed. You've got looks like you may have a speed bump coming up that needs to be addressed, type of thing. So let's do this. I know we've kind of, in the introduction, you kind of went around exactly what you were doing, and the gist of it is, hey, we're raising pigs in pasture or in woodlot. We're trying to see the value of that. But when it came time to actually putting together the problem solution of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to determine, so what is the intended outcome? Can you go back and just summarize that again so everyone knows the scope and the timeline? And we'll get in the timeline second, but just kind of talk about the scope of the project in some of those key points.
Yep. So the project encompasses roughly 4 acres of our woodlot. That is right now a lot of standing dead ash, a lot of maple. Fortunately, the ash trees falling over have started the silvopasture process for me, right. Because they create these huge openings in the canopy, and then I get a lot of grasses growing. I also get a lot of multiflora rose growing. So I've gone out there and tried to remove some of that, but the pigs, I leave big chunks of it. The pigs actually use it as shade, and they get in there, and the thorns don't seem to bother them. So, right. But I leave a lot of that. But my goal was to do 14 pigs this year, which is what I did last year. Unfortunately, I was only able to get 12 from a farm in York, Pig Hollow Farms, which those guys are great. If you're in Pennsylvania or maybe Northern Maryland and looking for a place with very healthy, very energetic piglets, that's where I got mine for 2 years now. But I rotate them through anywhere from 4 to 6 paddocks. It all depends on their impact. So once they start, before they moonscape an area, I move them off of it into another. And I do have a lot of flexibility to kind of draw the paddocks as I envision them, and you work around fallen trees and things like that. And then once they leave a paddock, I'll go in there, I'll broadcast seed, I'll do those tree plantings, I'll take a follow-up soil sample to send off to the lab, and that'll show before and after effects of the pigs to, mostly nutrition, what their effect the manure had on it, and any kind of decomposition from them trampling plant matter into the ground, things like that. And then the forester will actually come and take compaction sample or compaction readings, which we did last year. And the pigs don't really compact the soil at any kind of, detrimental level. There's in their pathways, there's a couple inches of, more firm soil, but once you get down below that pathway, it's all very healthy. And then we move them around. They're on farm for about 6 months. They're about 2 months old when I get them, and then we butcher in October.
Yeah. So this is going to be a kind of a 2-year cycle, right? You've got your baseline set with your soil samples and the forester's assessment of this 4 acres. So that's your baseline. You run 1 year, process in the fall, take samples again, let the pastures lay fallow, or the woodlots lay fallow for the winter, and then do the exact same thing again. So you're technically doing 2 rotations, and then your grant will end technically the fall of 2024, correct?
Yes, sir. And it's like I said, there's no guaranteed outcome, but it's my expectation and certainly my hope that I'm going to very quantifiably be able to demonstrate that the pigs have a positive effect on fertility, usable plant species, and really no detriment out there in the woods. Mm-hmm. But yes, after 2 years, that's I will have gathered sufficient data to show a trend.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that especially with the information you're gathering, that will be very helpful for people looking at that research to say, okay, this is intriguing. But so are you incorporating as part of your data? Are you tracking anything as far as the life cycle of the pig, weight gain, feed conversion, all that type of stuff?
So I track all that for my own personal use, and I'll include it with my report, but I don't know that it's necessarily pertinent to the data. The data I'm, presenting is more on the woods. The pigs are just a tool to improve the woods.
Yeah.
But again, as we had discussed earlier, I was going to use more. So my first year, I used largely Duroc genetics, and they did very well. Those pigs, inside of 8 months, closer to 7 months, were all 300 pounds or more. I had one that he was just a grower. But last year, I was unable to get piglets from that original provider. So last year I raised the Pig Hollow Farm pigs. They come from primarily large black genetics, which they're great pigs. They don't really get any sunburn, and they're very great at foraging. They love grass. They love digging up, all the walnuts and hickory nuts that are buried out there. They just grow a little slower. So last year, after 8 months, I butchered closer to 240-pound pigs on average. I was also messing around with different feed styles and whether, free feeding versus scheduled feeding, and kind of just testing different methods. It is now firmly my belief that free feeding is the only way to go, and that the waste, which because I don't have one of those big green outdoor $3,000 feeders, the waste is just something I have to deal with. I tried a variety of troughs, all hand built. And what I'm using now, if you're familiar with Jordan Green, he makes one out of an IBC tote.
Yes.
And I built one of those. It works well, but I fine-tuned it again this year. We'll see how it does. The slit in the bottom of the tote where the feed falls out into the trough and goes through those PVC pipe baffles, I made it smaller because last year they were probably wasting $10 to $15 a feed a day on me.
Yeah, wow.
which very quickly adds up. And if it's on the ground and there's nice, clean, dry feed in the trough, they're just going to trample the stuff on the ground and not eat it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the balance you got to strike there and figure out what works best for you and your environment. So, Charles, let's talk real quickly about coming back around to the actual reporting, because I think some people would be reluctant to say, well, yeah, I can't. I don't think I can handle all the reporting and the requirements and the benchmarks, and I'm afraid, what if I miss? Am I going to be in trouble? Am I going to have to am I going to owe a bunch of money? Am I going to end up being insolvent because of something missed there? First of all, what are the data reporting requirements? And then what are the contingencies in place with a grant like this, just in case something would happen? God forbid you have a broken leg or something that's going to keep you out for the season. How do you manage those type of things? What's the expectations there?
So the expectation is that I'll obviously meet all the benchmarks that I'm the one that set them forth for myself. The SARE, I guess, is protected because they pay on net 30, right? So they don't just give me money. They pay. I send them invoices that I've already paid, and then they reimburse me. So they work strictly on a reimbursement basis. So obviously they're not putting out any money that hasn't gone to the spirit of the grant. As far as reporting, there is a very, very detailed report that I'm going to provide at the end of year 2, upon completion. But it's my intent to publish, at least through my website, monthly reports showing, here's what we did. Just a little one-pager on kind of, here's what the pigs are doing. Here's a picture of them. See, here's a picture of the paddocks. Here's the effect they're having. And not only will that give me feeder data for that final report, but it'll also, anybody who's trying to mimic this will be able to kind of follow along, and potentially even we could share data like, hey, here's what this species is doing. Here's what plants they're eating, things like that, which would be very interesting to me. But again, I prescribed all the gates in my application, so it's on me to meet the gates. If I don't, SARE reserves the right to kind of end the project, and then that would be the end of it. But I'm not going to let that happen. I'm gonna make sure I do what I said I'm going to do.
Right.
And then I'm also going to host 2 workshops. where I'll be able to give. So, for instance, in September of this year, I'm going to host a workshop here on the farm for anybody that wants to come kind of see it firsthand. And I will present all the data collected thus far. It'll include the original soil test data. It'll include the plant inventory, and then obviously September we're getting close to processing, so it'll have all the current feed consumption. I won't really have accurate weights, but I'll have eyeball weights and things like that, so that people can get kind of data as we go along.
Yeah, yeah, good deal. Good deal. Yeah, I think that's going to be a good way to address those things. And I love the fact that the reporting and the benchmarks are the things that you've set. So it wasn't like Sayers putting a heavy thumb down on you, say, yeah, here's what I need from you, and if I don't get it, we're going to pull this. But the fact that they're reimbursing you keeps you from being in a like a loan situation. So that's money that you've taken, you've spent, and if you don't meet benchmarks, then you got to give that money back. Now, granted, you could obviously miss getting a reimbursement, but you really kind of hold the keys to the car in that situation. So the effort you put in, based upon what you've set, is what's going to determine your reimbursement in those situations. So, it sounds like that there's really not an opportunity for, if I don't do this, there could be litigation, there could be criminal charges, or there could even just simply be fines levied against me because I didn't do these certain things. The way they've set it up is, of course, to keep acts of God and accidents from upsetting the apple cart and causing those type of situations. So I like how that's structured.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so real quick, what challenges do you see? So you've raised pigs on pasture. This isn't a new rodeo for you. This is something you've done. But what challenges do you see with adding this element to this year's pigs life cycle? Is there anything you think that's okay? Well, this is going to make things a little bit more difficult or more challenging.
So certainly, especially with the establishing of the edible fence line. If the pigs have a lot of potential to kind of hinder that process. So if they don't do what they did every other year, and they don't build me that planting berm, or they create a wallow right against the fence, then they're gonna create more work for me in establishing a planting area for the trees and shrubs. And then, additionally, if I don't, if things don't go as they're envisioned in my mind, then that's also going to create, which they probably won't, right? It never does, right. But that's also going to create challenges. But I just have to adapt to them, and so maybe I don't plant tree X in space Y. I got to be very flexible. But aside of that, no, I don't expect there's going to be really any additional burden. The pigs are going to do what the pigs do, and I just have to kind of let them do it, and then mold their behavior to fit the needs of the grant.
Yeah, and that's part of the data collection. I mean, that's how it works. Is here's your intended outcome, but depending on what happens, the hurdles you run into or the unforeseen circumstances, that's reported at that point. So you could say, wow, yeah, I had to come back and my planting density had to be greater or less, or actually had to do more manual labor in building a berm because there's some places where the berm didn't exist at all. But that's part of the reporting as well, to say, hey, here's how maybe I learned halfway through the year to encourage more berm building. That comes into place. It's funny you say that. I'm looking out my office window right now down at the very similar situation that I just really lucked into. It wasn't like Troy's evil genius here coming up with an idea. As coming down the side of our south mountain, I put my electric fence, permanent fencing, out away from the edge of the break of the mountain where it comes down into the pasture. I brought it out about 5 feet, just so there would be some flat space for my pigs to interact, and I can feed them there because I like to rotate their feed locations. And over the several years of rotating them through this area, it's created that berm that you're talking of. Well, what's great in the wintertime, if we have a heavy rain event and there's some runoff and some potential erosion, then that berm is actually creating an erosion catch. So just the other day, after about 5 years of those pigs being in that area, rotated through, I took my tractor and just drove up the inside of that pig area, berm on one side, hillside on the other with a bucket, and I'm scooping out just incredible composted manure and topsoil and the leaves that have blown down the hill. So it's just been wonderful. So the berm has produced something I was not expecting, and by the way of a silt catch, and then also just a compost area there. So those are the type of things I'm excited to see with your project. You can see these additional benefits or additional challenges, but just seeing, hey, this is what I think is going to work in my mind. Let's actually see how it plays out, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only on, like I said, year 3, but when you walk, it's unfortunate that I don't have pictures of what my woods looked like 3 years ago. But the just from 2 full years of having pigs in there, and the first year was only 6 pigs, the effect they have on it is really night and day. They clean up everything that's fallen and dead. They open up the kind of the pathways that to much more than a deer trail, and they get rid of stuff that they I guess isn't beneficial either by trampling or eating it, and that removal of those species allows a lot of grass, a lot of clover, a lot of things that they do want to pop up. So it really is night and day. They have the effect they have on the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Charles, so we talked a little bit about you're going to present your findings on your website, and we're going to make sure that we have that down in our show notes so you guys can kind of see that as it unfolds. I think you said you're going to try to post something monthly there. But what else? I mean, we know we're going to have this on our podcast. We're going to talk about that, even talking with you about ways that we can present it through the YouTube channel just to have a visual to go along with the audio details here of the podcast. But it's my understanding, as a veteran, you're also involved in a network, or you're going to incorporate this. So how does that dovetail into this network that you told me about?
So the Pennsylvania Veteran Farming Network, which is you can find them at troopstotractors.org, and I'll make sure you have their data as well. Is that I've actually worked with them for a while on a lot of things. They're a great organization, and they have obviously it's focused on Pennsylvania farmers, but they have a lot of really cool projects and information on their site as well. But they're going to help get the word out, especially about the presentation that I'm going to give in September, the workshop that I'm going to host. So they'll help spread the word. Yes, I would like to gear my, I guess, my information to veterans that have that are interested in agriculture, because that's kind of the space I've been in for over 20 years. But really, it's for anybody that's interested in coming out and seeing what this can do, because while everybody may not have a large acreage, and I guess 12 acres really isn't a large acreage, but it's larger than a lot of people have. Mm-hmm. You could do this on so much less. All you got to do is reduce your stocking density. But yeah, the Pennsylvania Veteran Farming Network is going to help me with another project I was working on to run water line very recently. They helped me to run PEX below frost line to a frost-proof hydrant out in the woods through print grant proposal that I was able to obtain.
Yeah.
And now rather than dragging 300 feet of garden hose, I have a hydrant out there in the middle of the woods.
Awesome. Very good.
To fill pig waterers.
Yeah, that's great, man. Love it. Well, Charles, let me ask you this, and this is, I want to be sensitive to your time here, so we'll probably make this our last question, but how would you encourage people that are listening to say, well, I'm not quite sure I even want to stick my toe in the water here, or I'm afraid of this, or I'm apprehensive of this type of process? How would you encourage somebody to say, hey, this type of grant or exploring grants could be very advantageous for your farm?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? I guess just do it, um, but I guess to be a little more realistic, you have really nothing to lose when you read whatever the proposal asks for. If it's something that flat out you're not going to be able to do, if there's maybe a public speaking portion of it that's required and that's not your bag, then just don't consider that particular grant. But there are hundreds of grant opportunities with varying requirements out there, and I have a pretty high success rate with applying for them. But I also put, for instance, the SARE grant, I probably have 80 hours of work into just the application, right? Which can sound daunting, but I worked on it over months. So I would read the proposal and determine if it's something you're interested in, something you can meet the requirements for, and then just do it. Because once it's done, you just have to hold yourself to the work you agreed to do in the first place. Yeah. And if you don't get accepted, well, then you've lost nothing but a little bit of your time. I would also say that absolutely put your best foot forward when you're applying. Don't just I guess kind of put half effort into the application process. Take it seriously and do your best work, and the results will be, evident.
There's an Army term for that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah. So, and I think that's a really good point, and I think the caution that we want to levy in this situation is, don't think, don't come at this flippantly and think, okay, somebody's going to give me money to do what I'm doing already. That's the wrong attitude. But if you're looking at a way to enhance or to expand or to try something new on your farm and help minimize that risk of trying something new, then I think that's when a grant is a good fit for that. But if you're looking for somebody to just say, hey, here's another revenue stream I have for my farm that I'm going to try to take advantage of, then that's not going to be beneficial for you. You're going to be disappointed in the process.
Certainly, it's never free money.
Yeah, that's right.
So you need to first of all, it's taxable as income. So you're going to have to either expense it 100%, which is my goal, or pay your income tax rate on it. Exactly. But more important than that, especially with SARE, the point is to conduct research and make it publicly available to kind of lift up the entire agricultural space through, like, hey, here's the mistakes I made. Don't make them. Do something new and do something that works.
Yeah. I like it. Well, Charles, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and it's good to actually talk to you, actually hear your voice. I know we've communicated for months via email, but I'm really excited with what you've got going on here, and we will be doing some updates. It's not like we're going to go 24 months from now and then do another podcast episode. Who knows what can happen in 24 months, right? But we'll touch base with you from time to time and see how it's going, and make sure our listeners know that as well, and they can be able to go to your website. So first of all, let's talk about that. So if people want to start following you right now, what are your digital opportunities to be pursued?
So the best place to start would be skylinepastures.com. And then there you can find our blog, where there is some mention of this grant, but there's also everything else I do. We do grass-fed beef, we do turkeys, we do pastured broilers. And then my wife writes a lot of the blog posts. She's a much better wordsmith than I am. So and she's also very funny. So people do enjoy reading the blog. Usually it's about some animal or another trying to murder her.
Right.
So if you want a good laugh, you can go there. But there's also links to our Instagram and Facebook there. And then my contact information, my name, the farm's phone number, things like that are all available there as well.
Excellent. Well, I got to say, first of all, I want to say thank you for your service, for the years that you've spent in the military. And I've noticed throughout this entire podcast episode, you kept calling me sir, and I know for a fact you outrank me. So that wasn't necessary, but man, I appreciate it, and really like what you've got going on here.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Troy.
All right. You have a great day.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.